So Nick, I've spent the last couple of days playing around with the streaming game service from PlayStation called PlayStation Now, and I know that you've been using it quite a bit, haven't you?
Yeah, almost coincidentally, actually. I've just been kind of messing with it because I finally took the step of plugging in my PS4 via Ethernet, and I wanted to see how decent it actually was. This is actually footage of me playing Tokyo Jungle with it to moderate success. So
Nice.
let's back up a bit. How has it been for you? How have you found it?
Well, you know, the reason that I wanted to experience it is because I like all these weird games. You can't play Tokyo Jungle anywhere else but on a PlayStation 3 or through the PlayStation Now service, right? That's just how it is. And being that I really like those games, I've been wanting to try out the PlayStation Now service and fired it up, put it on my wireless network at home, and it ain't been great, Nick.
No.
It's not been fun at all. We'll get to some examples of that later in the video, but I'm really jealous of your setup here because this looks rock solid. This is like what the game should look like.
Yeah, and it's funny. This is actually not the best I've ever had it run. I think my roommate was like watching Netflix in bed at the time when I recorded this, because I remember when I captured this footage, I felt a little bit of latency and saw a little bit of artifacting on the screen, which is not normal for PS Now for me. Most of the time when there's no one else at home and there's no one on my internet, it runs pretty beautifully. That said, when I first tried it over Wi-Fi, I attempted to play Tokyo Jungle like a month ago, and ran into compression, frame drops, about like a full second of latency, and then eventually the thing just, a countdown timer would appear, and it was like, your connection's not stable enough, we're kicking you off in 60 seconds, and then it counted me down and threw me off the service. So,
oh geez.
Mileage can definitely vary depending on how reliable your internet connection is, for sure.
Yeah, and just recently, PlayStation's rebuilt the app that kind of powers PlayStation Now. This is what it used to look like, and actually what it still looks like inside the PlayStation Store, but they recently redid it and changed it over to something like this, and it looks a lot more like Netflix. If you have a Netflix subscription, it's really big and beautiful, and they've added a lot of art to the backgrounds, and they've also added a subscription service, Nick. So I believe for about $40-some, you can get a 3-month subscription, and there's about 100 titles that are included in the subscription.
But it's funny, I actually almost forgot the a la carte rental option existed until you mentioned it to me, and there was a much more robust selection there.
There's about 382 titles total.
Yeah, whereas their official number for the so Netflix style subscription is 100+ games, and it's a pretty random selection of games. It almost reminds me, around the time that Xbox 360 achieved backwards compatibility with original Xbox games, there was like the Halos and stuff you'd expect, but then there was like the Barbie Horse Adventures and stuff. And while it's not quite like that, the rental games has some weird picks. Like for example, games like Sound Shapes that exist on the PS3 and PS4. Like personally, I don't know why anyone would choose to stream the PS3 version when they could natively run the PS4 version, except for, of course, they'd rather just pay a monthly fee. But some of that seems weird to me. Like games that exist on both platforms being available. Like Last of Us, another great example.
Well, right. I also ran into a weird thing last night where I was trying to play Mousecraft, which is a free title, out of the PlayStation Store this month with my PlayStation subscription. But then there was also a rental option to play the same game, sitting
Weird.
right next to each other in the search window. It was very strange.
That's super bizarre.
Yeah. But, you know, stuff like, Crazy Taxi, you've got Dead Island, you've got Bioshock Infinite, all of that's involved with the subscription model. So there's some really high-quality titles in there as well.
I've been watching my girlfriend play through Enslaved, Odyssey to the West for the first time.
Nice.
Which is a game I love really dearly, and it's running... It's weird. It's a weird thing, because like from a PlayStation Now perspective, it's running... really, really well. Like the controls feel responsive and everything, but then you have to remember that these are PS3 games at their core. So even though they're being broadcast onto a PS4, like that game had a horrible frame rate on consoles, and it continues to have a horrible frame rate even in the PS Now version. So for a second, I was like, "Oh, is it PlayStation Now being janky?" And I was like, "No, wait, I totally forgot that Enslaved just had a bad frame rate, period."
And I think some of that is kind of what we're seeing with something like Eco right here. I mean, Eco, a very classic game, but we come to it with a very different set of eyes now that we've had, 1080p 60 for, the better part of this generation. But, during my experience playing Eco, it really it began to get even worse than the generation previous. And I came to find that it was mainly because I was doing it wirelessly. Went and did a little research with some help of the Sony PR folks as well when I reported back my troubles, and they don't actually recommend using a wireless connection to play PlayStation Now at all. And I think that the main reason for that is packet loss. It wants a 5 megabit connection, and it wants all of it, right? It doesn't want you doing anything else with that connection. No Hulu, no Netflix, no iTunes, no nothing.
And I'm so split on it for that reason, because when it works, it's like magic. Like, so you're seeing some of the hitch, that compression, and like, look at this. It's a bummer, because when it works like almost magically, but it's, even at its best, like even in my pretty ideal scenario with it hooked right into the router via Ethernet, it's unreliable in ways that make me feel weird about spending like $20 a month or whatever on it. Like, I don't know. It's just, I'm so split on PlayStation Now, because the impressive technology when it functions, but when it behaves the way it's behaving for you in some of this footage, it's like, I would not recommend that to anyone. That experience is terrible. You can even see like the screen tearing here in XCOM, super obvious.
Yeah, and this is after I started having those issues with the previous game. I switched to XCOM, which is something I'm super familiar with. I know what it's supposed to look like. I shut down every other computer in the house. I turned off all our phones. I did everything except connect a hardline, which is what I needed to do. And still, I was getting this jitter and this lag. My wife, who very occasionally will watch me play some games during work hours when I'm doing review stuff, was like, "Can you turn this off? This is giving me a headache." I'm like, "Yeah, all right."
It's pretty rough, and it's also weird, especially now that like in light of everything Microsoft announced at E3 with backwards compatibility kind of running natively off the system, not really based on streaming at all, and just working if you own the game on Xbox Live or on a disc. The value proposition for PlayStation Now gets a lot trickier, because all of a sudden Sony's asking us to pay, even though it's a subscription fee, and I think that's a lot more reasonable of an ask than renting a la carte. They're asking us to pay to play old PS3 games that we may or may not actually own. Whereas Microsoft is essentially giving them to you for free. And it's not a perfect one-to-one comparison. Like, one isn't strictly better than the other, because the size of the catalog you get with PlayStation Now is okay now and will presumably get better over time. But it does call into question, like, if this was a perk for PlayStation Plus members, like, that would be an incredible, awesome benefit that would help sort of, I guess, counterweight against the backwards compatibility stuff we're seeing on Xbox One.
Well, if it does anything, though, it lives up to its branding, right? It plays now. I did not have to wait more than 2 minutes to start playing any of those 400 games on that catalog, or any of the 100 that were in the subscription. It was really immediate, and it allowed me to kind of, as a shopper, go through and look at titles that I might have otherwise missed and go back and play them.
For sure. It's kind of cool to be able to treat games the way I treat Netflix, where I'll play something for 4 minutes and be like, I'm not really feeling this. I'm just going to go play Pac-Man Championship Edition again for the millionth time. With Uncharted, that's a great example. I almost booted up Uncharted 2 to show it to my friend who had never seen it before, and then I realized that HD collection of Uncharted is coming out on the PS4 in 1080-60 in just a couple months, and I was like, well, at that point, maybe I should just wait,
Right. But here I booted right into the original Uncharted, and this was great. And this was after I'd spent some time with XCOM, and this worked, pretty flawlessly to me. There was really very little latency to the controller. I felt like I was able to do things fairly well, and not a lot of screen tearing. So I don't know. The one thing that I could say about the PlayStation Now experience for me, wirelessly at least, is that it was spotty. And for you with the wired, it felt like it was at least a little more consistent, but still let you down on occasion.
Occasionally, yeah. Like, and it really seemed to come down to whether or not other people in my house were using the internet. But like, yesterday I played Tokyo Jungle for like an hour and a half, and after about 2 minutes, I'd completely forgotten it was not running on my PS4.
Yeah. Well, PlayStation Now, the new app is available now. Go ahead and check it out. See what value you find in thinking about the subscription, and definitely look into some of the back catalog if you've not played it before, and let us know what your experience is on your connection down in the comments.